kia ora and good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started. It's really good to have you here, 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. This afternoon, we're talking about this is part of our series on tech trends arising out of COVID. And so we've done a couple of series. We've done the general digitalization one with Jade, and we've done remote working with Chorus. And today we're going to be talking about the future of payment, which is contactless. And so in this world of COVID-19, you know, we've stopped using cash, and cards are a little bit passé, and contactless is really the one we want to get into. I'm just wondering if people have got two things before we get started. I'm going to be watching the chat, also the Q&A. So if you'd like to ask a question, type it into the Q&A section, and you can also vote those questions up and down. I'm getting a bit of feedback, so I'm going to hand over straight over to Will and Maxine. So Maxine's going to go first. She's the CEO of Paymark, and she's also on the 2Jun board. So Maxine, why don't you take it away?
Great, thanks, Craig. So, believe it or not, we're here today to talk about payments. And payments is not something that many Kiwis think much about, and probably particularly don't think about it in terms of tech or the new digital world. But, you know, I think one of the reasons that Kiwis don't think about payments is because actually New Zealand's had one of the best and most efficient payment systems in the world since the 80s, and we tend to take that for granted. So today we wanted to talk to you about why you should care about payments and what the future of that could look like for New Zealand if we get it right. So a little bit of background first. Did you know that New Zealand is basically almost 100% banked? That is, pretty much everyone has a bank account, and we have almost no cash in our society. Now that's pretty different to the rest of the world. I mean, whether you're in Asia or whether you're in Germany, you know, a lot of cash is used around the world. In fact, Germany uses still 50% of their transactions are cash. So we really are world leading. Why are we world leading? Because around 30 years ago, our banks got together and realised we were a small market. How could we efficiently get cash out of New Zealand to reduce the costs to New Zealand Inc. as a whole, but also to the banks? So they created what we now know as today as Paymark. And Paymark was all about enabling what you know today is the EFTPOS card. And the good little EFTPOS card that was issued by your bank meant that you could go anywhere to any store, make a payment without any limits. So unlike, for instance, in Australia, where you had to spend more than $5 or $10 to use your piece of plastic, in New Zealand, you could go anywhere and use it for anything. And it became very popular. And today we're in a situation where we use almost no cash. So it was also really amazing because it was largely free for merchants and free for the consumer. And that was because it was all about taking the cost of cash out of our society. So it was a fantastic thing, and we've embraced it amazingly. But COVID has really thrown a bit of a spotlight on the whole payments issue, and particularly the rise of contactless. And we know that Kiwis want to use contactless, consumers love it, and it's a great thing. But believe it or not, there are some issues with it. So this is a really complex slide, but the thing that we wanted you to know, or some things that you need to think about, is you may or may not know that your Visa debit card is not an EFTPOS card. It's a card issued by Visa. And really interestingly, if you use that card, your Visa debit card, in the same way that you use your good old EFTPOS card, you insert it into the terminal in your retailer, then it goes via our local EFTPOS network. And there are very low costs to running that local EFTPOS network. So the retailer or merchant has relatively small charges associated with that. But if you take that same card which is doing exactly the same thing, taking money from your bank account, so your Visa debit card, and you waive it as a pay wave, then in a contactless transaction, then all of a sudden your merchant or retailer gets charged a lot more charges because that transaction suddenly gets processed internationally by the credit card company. Now, that means that on average, a retailer or merchant in New Zealand pays 3% on every transaction that you waive. So it's kind of weird given you're actually just taking money from your bank account either way. But it's an anomaly of our system and something that has been agreed that we will let the credit card companies do. So a lot of it's because we just don't understand how it works and nobody cares, and why should you? So really what we're talking about today is how can we get the best deal for New Zealand? How can we get the best deal for our retailers and for our consumers so that some of these new technologies, but even better technologies, can happen and can be done locally at a low cost. So what's the problem? Well, COVID-19 has dramatically increased the use of contactless payments. We all want to not touch a terminal, and that's cool, that's fantastic. But it means that we're no longer using our low-cost homegrown network. It's all going offshore to the schemes, and that's costing everyone. So we really want to talk about what can we do about all of this. So there are solutions. Now, some of the short-term solutions are things like talking about, could we reduce the cost for the retailer by simply taking that contactless experience that you have and sending that down the local network and not out all around the world to be processed, so that we reduce the costs and therefore make it cheaper for both the merchants and you as a consumer. But that's a short-term thing. What we really want to be talking about is how do we take what was the good old EFTPOS card and turn that into some cool new experiences for the future. What does that look like? We all know the future's going digital. So how do we have a digital version of EFTPOS? Much like the telco move from copper to fibre, we want to look at taking the world from plastic to a mobile experience, or even better, maybe some cool new experiences, which Will is going to talk about in a minute. So Paymark's on this journey, and we're working at the moment and investing in the next generation of local debit technology so that you can have that go anywhere, spend any time from your bank account, but with cool new experiences, maybe starting with mobile experiences. So no more plastic, and maybe in the future, no more terminals. So we're building a secure API payment infrastructure with the industry to enable an ecosystem that allows us to do these cool new things locally. We're creating a platform so that New Zealand fintechs can get in and start to really innovate for businesses and consumers. This is about creating choice. We're definitely not saying there isn't a place for the big global schemes or as credit card companies as you know them. There totally is, and they provide a whole lot of cool innovation themselves. But we want to have a thriving Kiwi ecosystem that creates innovation and low-cost opportunities for our businesses and consumers. And now more than ever with COVID, we need to be doing this to help Kiwi businesses as they get through this and compete on the global stage when it comes to the online world. So the banks are starting to come on board, but we've got a long way to go. So I'm going to hand over to Will, and he's going to talk to you about what the future for New Zealand could look like.
Thank you, Maxine. So as Maxine mentioned, we're building this API payment network using open banking technologies. So what is this open banking thing, and how is it actually going to solve the problems that Maxine outlined around the high fees and slow pace of innovation around our payments ecosystem today? Open banking, as the name implies, is actually where the process where the banks open up their books to third parties to access the data and provide services on behalf of their customers with the explicit consent of their users. So in the payment sense, it's actually allowing third-party payment processors such as Paymark to be able to take money directly from your account and process payments for you with your consent in a nice, secure and low-cost manner. And you may ask, well, you've already got the EFTPOS network. Why do you need another whole new system to be able to process payments? Well, if we look at this EFTPOS network that we all know and love for the last 30 years, the point that you can interact with it is actually quite limited. So in our case, it's the EFTPOS machine, what we call terminals in store. And to Maxine's point earlier, as we're moving towards more of a contactless future, and we as consumers are starting to ask for more choices in how we pay. There are overseas visitors coming into a country demanding WeChat or Alipay using QR code being the mean of actually taking that transaction. So as merchants, as payment processors, we actually need to upgrade that experience alongside the demand and with the time as well. But the network that we've got with the interface being the EFTPOS terminals is inflexible so that we actually won't be able to do that quick enough. So this whole new open banking technology then allows us to then have a digital experience that is so versatile and that is so flexible, we can actually build that experience to suit the need of each type of merchant. So the endpoint no longer has to be constrained to a terminal. It could be your mobile phone. It could be your fingerprint and a fingerprint reader. It could be a QR code displayed on a terminal on a screen, or it even could be just facial recognition. So as a user, you don't actually have to interact or touch anything. So it's pure contactless in a sense that you actually don't have to interact with anything at all. And the other second advantage of open banking is the cost and the pace of innovation. So if we think about the terminals and the international card schemes and their contactless, we essentially are beholden to their pace of innovation, and we are responsible and have to basically pay the fees that they impose on our merchants. But with open banking, it's purely a New Zealand Inc. innovation where we as New Zealand can take back the control of where payment innovations go in the future. We can work with you and bring on other parties to collectively provide you with the new payment experiences that you deserve, and also be able to do that at a cost that's fair for all to participate in. So for Paymark, that open banking platform is called Open. And we currently are actually working on a whole range of different use cases where Open as the powerful engine to process payment digitally through open banking can actually help you as merchants or helping you as a consumer to take or make payments in a whole range of settings. We'll go through a few that we currently are working on today. Many of these products are already live, and as you see, there are a few that we're still working on in the future, which are the ones in light blue. So starting with online payments and retail is starting to become the next thing. In New Zealand, our share of online transactions has increased steadily from around 10% to now almost 20%, and even throughout this, and obviously accelerated by the whole COVID pandemic, it's very much entrenched as part of the Kiwi life now to buy online. So, but still, there are still 30% people out there who haven't got a credit card or a debit card with a 16-digit or Visa logo, MasterCard logo, so they can't participate in online. And through open banking, we have made a product called Online EFTPOS, where from your mobile phone and your online banking app, directly you can approve transactions. And it's secure because all you're handing over on the website is your phone number. And that we use that to identify you and send a secure payment request straight to your banking app where you can review and process that transaction. And taking that same philosophy around open banking then in store, we'll talk to you very soon about the whole facial recognition trial, how we're using open bank to take away the need of any wallet or any card or any phone in store in the most seamless way you can imagine to make that payment. And at the same time, we've also introduced a touch-free EFTPOS experience into more than 200 merchants during the COVID time, where a merchant could then request a payment from a safe distance, where they take your phone number and then send the payment request into your phone, into your online mobile banking app, where you can approve that payment from a distance without having to interact with any hardware as well. And that actually was taken up by a whole lot of small merchants who did not have contactless capabilities on their terminals. And in addition to all of that, we're looking at how to bring Bluetooth into the play, because that's starting to be a technology that we can leverage to interact with a phone and with the hardwares in the shop. And lastly, we've also done an integration with a NOLA virtual assistant at their Newmarket flagship store, where you actually, by talking to this virtual assistant on the screen, you can place an order for coffee and actually still be able to then pay for that coffee using the payment request that's sent to your mobile phone as well. And then the next pillar, what we call TradesPay, is where we can actually build a request to pay app for the tradespeople that are on the road to be able to request payment through sending the same secure request into the consumer's banking app as well. And if we think about a tradesperson, right now it's either things go onto their account, they invoice you, and they have to spend hours reconciliating the payments, or they actually have to carry a mobile EFTPOS machine, which sometimes they forget to charge, in which case they can't take payments from you and you have to pay them later. So this app, again, solves that problem, and for them and for other people who are on the go, like charity collectors, like your cookie sellers, and also like your local market store holders. Looking in the future, we also are looking at the bill pay scene, where we all know, because we all pay bills, and part of the hassle of paying bill is actually opening up all the envelopes and actually getting all your bills in the same place. And to have a single view of when your bill's due and which bill is coming out of which account, and have I had it scheduled, is it going to line up with my pay cycle? With open banking, we can get the whole bills sent to a single environment within your banking app, where you, by logging into your banking app, can then have a list of all the bills that from all of your merchants presented in one place. And from there, you can schedule payments, you can look at due dates, you can even have a look at the whole PDF of the bill and be able to do things, if it's supported by your biller, to line the payment schedule up with your pay cycle as well. And then the last one that we're looking at is really a peer-to-peer capability, where you, if you're having a dinner with a group of friends, you don't have to individually line up behind a counter to pay, or having to send everyone your full bank account, hoping that, you know, when they're tipsy, being able to enter in the right amounts and the right bank account, most importantly. But you could now do so within your banking app by typing in, well, even just typing in their name and calling their phone number out from your contact book. So why are we doing all of this, and where is the future going? We're actually seeing a full ecosystem where at the middle is actually our merchants, our consumers. So we're designing all of these experiences with their needs in mind, and that's your need. So we all fit in one of the two camps, if not both. And we know that merchants have different needs and consumers have different needs as well. So all of these payment settings and products we talked about is really meant to be serving the merchants and consumers in this country well. So we talked about the setting, that's the next ring up. Our vision for the future ecosystem is that payments should be able to happen anywhere and all time. It shouldn't be constrained to just a terminal, it shouldn't be constrained to just one type of card, or one type of plastic, one type of device. It can happen for all. And payment shouldn't either just be an island as well. As you're doing a payment, that whole explicit step of making a payment should go away. And along with that, as you're making that payment, we can actually do other things together, such as integrating your loyalty as part of that. So when you're making a payment, your loyalty earn and burn is being taken care of. Maybe your age verification, your digital identity can be taken care of as you're paying for your alcohol. You no longer have to whip out your ID. and or try and find different cards or bring different spaces for your paper receipt. That could all be done at the same time as you're making that payment. And if we're then taking even a wider look, who can benefit from all of this? Even though at the center of all of this is the merchant and the consumer, but hey, there's a lot of data that we're generating from this process, which can feed right back into the merchant to help them to make informed decisions about their business. We can actually plug in third-party softwares like accounting softwares or inventory management or revenue maximization softwares for the merchants to use our transaction data to help them to grow their business and save cost. And from a government point of view, or iwi or other organizations, they can also tap into this ecosystem where, from a policy point of view, they can then make the best policies to support our businesses and our whole New Zealand Inc. And obviously, we bring the banks along the journey as well. So we want to keep as much functionality within the banking app. So it's a one-stop shop where you can actually manage your entire finance and a whole lot more within the same place. And this future, we're already taking the first step towards it. With online EFTPOS being our first product that we launched 2 years ago, we're already garnishing so much momentum behind online, open banking through this one use case. Now, to a point, we actually have online EFTPOS as the flagship open banking product available to 1.5 million consumers in New Zealand across the 4 banks that are currently on board with our platform. So that's Westpac, ASB, Co-op, and Heartland. And this year, we're actually aiming to add 2 other major banks onto the platform as well, opening up this product up to another more than 1 million consumers. And from a platform point of view, if you are a merchant, you may actually recognize some of the names on here. So maybe to go being a New Zealand food service, hospitality platform, solutionist, and being more of a retail platform, Black Pepper, and Shopify being for more catered towards smaller businesses going online. We are already there. So as you sign up to partner with one of these platforms, online EFTPOS is sitting there waiting for you to turn on and use and be able to start taking payments using online banking, open banking in a cost-effective but also ubiquitous way where your customer can come to you and they don't have to have a credit card or a debit card to be able to buy and pay for things online. And from a merchant adoption side, you might already recognize this from one of these merchants that are currently on our network, most famously Pizza Hut, KFC, Carl's Jr., Toyco, Nova Energy, Mighty Ape, and obviously our guest, Sean, you will recognize the bigger fuel being one of the oldest merchant partners that have been on board as well. We recently just brought on Skinny Mobile, who then is part of the Spark group, and that's allowing their users to be able to top up their phone from their mobile app and also from the website without having to go into a dairy or a shop to buy a top-up voucher as well. And we're ready to take the next steps into in-store. And the first cab off the run was the facial recognition experience, which we'll talk to you a bit about now. And we'll then bring Sean to have a little bit chat with you about, from a merchant point of view, how this open banking innovation is helping him as a merchant to serve his customers a bit better. So the trial that together with Burger Fuel we did at the towards the back of last year is that we've got a camera put in underneath the POS machine. So when a customer enters a store, the camera will passively detect the customer. And when the customer says, yes, I want to pay with facial recognition, then the camera is actually then activated. And then the matching process of, okay, we recognize this person, they are a registered user of this open banking service, and that face ID is sent to the POS screen of the cashier. Then the cashier pushes through the sales and then selects the person's face ID by verifying that is indeed the one that's, that matches to the person standing in front of them. And from a user's point of view, they don't have to take out any device. All they need to do is say, I want to pay with facial recognition and smile into the camera, and then they will get a notification from their banking app telling them that the payment has been processed. So it's all very seamless, all very secure, and there's a lot of really good customer feedback that we gather from the back of it as well. Well, the video's done a lot better of a job introducing Sean than I could. So with that, Sean, the floor is yours.
Hi guys, thanks Will. As Will said, my name is Sean. I work for the Burger Fuel group of companies here. The main one that probably everyone knows is, funnily enough, Burger Fuel. Yeah, that video definitely was a bit jumpy, but I'll just try and paraphrase a bit what that video was really trying to explain. So as Will mentioned just earlier on as well, in the sort of last part of last year, sort of October, I was really lucky to get to take part in the closed pilot of the facial payment system. We managed to get a group of people from the Burger Fuel office here, some staff from Paymark, and from one of the large New Zealand banks to get some staff involved. We had 3 stores that were available, all in Auckland. And this was just really a good opportunity. I'm really lucky in my position here that I'm always pushed by colleagues to try and see what is coming up, what's new, what can we do that other people aren't, you know, and what can we do our way to try and appeal to our customer base. You know, at the end of the day, food is very much a commodity. People can stay home and make their own, often for a better price. So getting people through the door, very important to us while maintaining our brand values. During the trial, there was a lot to take away from it. You know, the concept of paying with your face was sort of the only thing you see from Minority Report, if anyone remembers that movie from a while ago. So it was really good to see not only is this a New Zealand-based technology, but something that actually is forthcoming. The video actually goes on to talk about how people are using their phones to unlock their Windows computers and phones and tablets and things like that these days. So it is becoming more accepted from the consumer perspective. I've personally found my time working in tech that you really have to choose the right time to launch. If you're too early with a platform, people won't use it. If you're too late, you're literally too late. So you really have to time what it is you're doing really well. And I think post-COVID and the time that we are in the world now is a really good opportunity to start utilizing these new platforms. From the merchant perspective, which is clearly the most important part as to why I'm here, there's a few things. Things like contactless payments as a payment instrument have grown more and more, from NFC cards to phones and watches and things like that. I've watched our fees go from the tens of thousands of dollars a year into the hundreds of thousands of dollars by the adoption of these contactless instruments, which Maxine sort of explained really well there. I think part of it can be addressed with a bit of customer education and retailer and merchant education, because a lot of people that I speak with just genuinely don't understand that when their bank has issued them with a issuer debit card, it's technically not treated as debit. So you're always going to pay more for converting that transaction. So it is a balance. Back to the trial that I was very lucky to take part in, it made me realize a few things pretty quickly. Okay, New Zealanders are very lucky and very forward thinking in terms of the number 8 wire approach to solving problems. It also made me realize pretty quickly how lucky my business is that we have a really good relationship with our point of sale software company. They were really open with us and allowed us to build our own integration that would allow us to communicate with the open Paymark network. When we managed to get this completed in a very, very rough sort of alpha environment test within about a day. Clearly that wasn't the version that we ended up using. At the time, it was simply returning faces of different Avenger characters from the movies. But once we had the framework in place, it was really, really easy for us to expand onto that. If anyone's ever dealt with third-party companies with integrations and developments, development documentation is very crucial to allow you to develop what you need to in a timely fashion. And all of the paperwork and stuff that we got for this integration was perfect. It really helped us get to the trial stage as quickly as humanly possible. I can't imagine there would have been too many other places that would have had the luck we had and the support we've had to be able to do this. In terms of the trial, we were really lucky that we had a couple of Paymark staff come in and help us with the registration process. I actually did mention in that video there, I personally am quite an advocate for privacy. The thing that kind of drew me to this as a trial was the fact that it was an opt-in and not opt-out process. theorizing for a market launch. That's really important to me. There's nothing worse than being enrolled in a platform that you don't choose to. I think moving forward, customers are going to be far more particular about who they share their data with and what data they share. The rest of the world is sort of slowly moving towards GDPR adoption, and I think it's only a matter of time before it comes to New Zealand. So having this framework will allow us to be able to basically interact with our customers the way that they want and only see the data of theirs that's relevant to us to help them purchase from us. So, these are really, really important factors when I have to think about what do we choose to pursue and put our time and energy into. There were a few things that I did take from the trial, mainly people things, which are not normally the area I tend to focus on. But, some people were saying that after a lifetime of interacting with a sale and a purchase and, acquiring goods and services, it was a very new experience. They were almost waiting there after the transaction had been tendered for something to happen. This was not on the first case. This was once an auto pay feature had been enabled, so that it was just sort of very seamless and automated. So from my side, it sort of made me realize that that sort of second factor authentication of accepting the payment charge through your mobile phone at the time was really important. Again, I think that's really to do with the fact that no one's done this before, and it would probably be more of a bedding in type thing. As I say, we did the trial for about 6 weeks. I'm a supporter of the Movember charity, so I did manage to get a couple of weeks in there where I was growing a very sheepish moustache, which was relevant because it meant that the camera had a different face to detect, and every time without fail it picked up my face without any issue at all. There is definitely a few other things we learnt. Anyone that's ever taken a photo and understands lighting can appreciate that camera placement and things like sunset, sunrise, when the weather changes, the lighting changes. So that was the sort of real world environmental things that we learnt pretty quickly. We had to be very certain of. Let's jump onto this. Yeah, it went really well. I guess for me, the other part is that the camera is actually almost meaningless. It's simply an instrument. By nature of having the framework in place, as Will touched on before, the camera was a great trial to see its feasibility, but it means that you could use anything, right? Fingerprints, beacons, Bluetooth is something that I think is going to be worked on in the future. It can literally be anything, and that's what I find really exciting. The other part, New Zealanders, both customers and retailers and merchants, we're all very cost conscious, right? It's basic economics. If you're selling something, you want to try and keep as much of the profit for yourself as you can. So by not sending our funds overseas to the big scheme providers and keeping it local to New Zealand, that's always going to be an advantage for us as a New Zealand business. It's going to be really interesting to see, what happens in future with this platform. I'm really excited by it. I know that we're going to continue to review and support it as best we can. And as things expand and we can start to look at accruing more information for things like loyalty, if and when customers allow us to obtain that information, we're definitely pretty eager to jump on board with that. And that's probably about it from my view from the retailer perspective. It was very straightforward. The costs were reduced compared to the others. And yeah, I'm really excited to see this move forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. So it's with the help with the merchants like Sean, who are really forward thinking about all of these things, that we together can learn and really design the experience to really suit the needs of the merchants and the consumers that are using these open banking payment services. And we are very confident in the future as we learn, as we grow, as we do these trials of different types of technologies, we'll get there and into that whole future ecosystem that we painted earlier. What does that actually look like then from an in-store point of view? And this is actually just us putting our thoughts together based on what we already see that we are working on and what's possible. So it's really about turning transactions into experiences. So each time when a consumer is having an interaction with the merchant, that is an experience that is so good on both sides and so seamless that it's all just very positive. And so a few things to call out. So as a consumer walks past the store, they can opt into receiving promotions. So the Bluetooth beacon around the environment could actually pick the consumers up and send them a deal or time-bound promotion as they walk past. And if they choose to come into the store, then, and again, with their consent, they could be positively identified by the cashier. So a customized service could then be provided as part of that interaction. And when times comes for payment, then the whole facial recognition experience then allows for a completely hands-free, device-free, and card-free contactless experience. And at the same time, if the user again chooses, they can make their digital ID available, so alcohol sales could be done as part of that payment process. And the e-receipts or loyalty program and information could actually all be passed through at the same time, so there is no more paper exchange or having to show any more cards for any of those purposes. From a merchant's point of view, they then actually get a real-time feed of all the transactions, whether it's coming in from in-store or coming from online. It's all coming into the same system where they have visibility around the performance of their store. So on a quiet days, they can then choose to do something a bit clever and offer more deals. And on a busier days, they can also respond to the crowd accordingly as well by encouraging more people to order online ahead of time instead of all coming into the store. And most importantly, we want to make this low cost. So this whole experience that we design here in New Zealand could uniquely be accessible to all New Zealand merchants. And by offering those experiences, then our merchants could then make all these very great experience available to all of the consumers, which we all are. So that's why we're doing all this open banking thing. Yes, we think the future will be contactless, but also we think the future will be a lot more. And with all your help and with all of us doing it together, we'll get there. So thanks for your time. And I'll pass it back to Craig.
Okay, we've got some questions for the team. And so just remember, people, if you want to put questions in, type them into the Q&A section, and you can also vote them up. And there's a couple that have been voted up. So let's go and ask. So these are to Will and Maxine to start with. There's a bit of a cheeky one. Can you tell us what the other two banks are that will be online this year?
No.
They will hopefully be announced very soon.
I mean, naturally, as you can understand, that we're working with the banks as partners, and you know they don't want to let any cats out of the bag at this stage. So,
right. I had a question for you. There's some more, but I wanted to get my question in, which is, having been involved in the telecommunications industry a long time ago, we did a lot of work around being able to help people make seamless transfers from one to another. And the electricity industry has just gone through a whole report framework around switching as well, and to try and make it easy to switch between providers. Switching banks is not that easy. And I'm wondering whether your open platform would actually make transferring banks easier, particularly that one you talked about, having all your bills in one place.
yeah, I mean, potentially, yes. I mean, globally, that is part of what open banking's been about. I mean, in New Zealand, open banking started with a focus around payments, but certainly it is allowing you to give permission to your bank to let others use your data, if you like, so that you can more seamlessly do things like shift banks, manage your accounts, manage your bills and all those things. So yeah, ultimately that is the end game, which is all about creating competition and some of the innovation that, you know, we're talking about in payments, but could absolutely happen in other parts of your banking world.
Yeah, so the beauty, to Maxine's point, the beauty of open banking is that it allows people like Paymark, but a whole lot of other players to then all come in, and it kind of levels the playing field, right? So you could actually be a software provider that compares the different options from different banks, because now you have access to the bank's systems and data to then analyze what's the best product for a user based on their spending trend and based on their selection of different banking products, and then suggesting that to the user. So that was previously imaginable, but now with open banking, it essentially opens up that door for different players to be in. And we as Paymark obviously can't be there for everybody. Our bread and butter is payments and making that payment process most seamless and customer friendly, and from a merchant's point of view, as low cost but as rich is our mission that we are embarking on. But there will be other people fighting the battle alongside us and all trying to make everyone's life easier.
So here's one question that quite a few people want to ask you. How will you manage the security and privacy aspects of such a seamless experience?
I'll probably give a view, and Sean, feel free to jump in on that as well. So the principle of open banking, and to open up really, then the key is to give the control back to the consumer. And we are a huge believer that explicit consent from the consumer is absolutely paramount to allow us to have the trust to act on their behalf. So with the example of facial recognition, it's strictly an opt-in process. To do that, the consumer actually have to do quite a few different things. So A, they have to trust either the bank or the third party with their facial biometrics. We want that to sit with the banks because people already trust their banks a lot with many different things, including, you know, their passports and your income statements if you're getting a loan out from them. So people probably do feel a bit more comfortable doing that. And secondly, they need to trust Paymark as a payment processor, like you do today every time you use our EFTPOS network with your banking credentials. In this case, it's what we call an auto-pay consent, where you rely on us to be the to check your facial biometrics against what's on file, and then being able to process that payment on your behalf. And without the consumers feeling comfortable with either of these two trusts, then you wouldn't actually, the camera wouldn't pick you up in the way that the camera is just sitting there, just like anything else in the store. So you're completely opt out of that process.
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly on that one as well. So yeah, absolutely, it has to be in the hands of the customer, the end user. You know, that's the only way that I would happily, you know, look at deploying a technology in our business. You know, and it would have to remain like that. You know, I'm not talking about the classic social media setup of you set your privacy once, then they change their privacy and you have to set it all again. That would just be not tenable for me to consider. Yeah, ultimately, you know, you would want at a very granular level, I would, of what data does that customer want to supply us with. You know, payments, pretty important if you want to purchase something. But, you know, other information, you know, should really only be gathered if there is a purpose for it. And, you know, I would want that to be in the control and hands of the customer themselves.
Hey, Sean, while it's with you, let's put this one to you. How secure was the photo verification? I mean, could it be faked out by a photo or a 3D mask?
No, I couldn't do it. What we actually had was it had to pick up movement. So I'm not 100% around the you know, IP side of how Paymark implemented that. What I worked out pretty quick was if your eyes didn't move, it thought you weren't real. What would happen is through the integration that we built, there was a validity period. So if a camera had detected someone, it would have to detect them multiple times within a set period of time. Otherwise, you couldn't process that payment. You probably don't see it very well from the video, but there was a little green dot against each photo that had been returned that showed that that person had been detected as being live. You could hold up a photo, but you wouldn't be able to process a payment against it.
Right. I'm not going to ask you the question, but someone did raise, Paulette has said, well, what about twins? And I suppose it depends on how identical they are. Coming back to Will and Maxine, from the consumer point of view, what's going to convince somebody to use the technology when they still have to get their phone out? Wouldn't it be quicker and easier for them to continue tapping their card using PayWave?
Well, one of the experience that we actually trialed with Burger Fuel, you didn't have to get your phone out. So you literally walked, and you know, I think as Sean said, in fact, some ways, some people didn't like that. So they actually walked into the store, you know, they went up to purchase their burger, they were detected by the camera. Do you want to pay with face pay? Yes, press done. They didn't touch anything. They didn't take a phone out. Now, some people said they would have preferred to have taken their phone out and actually see the transaction on their phone, because that gave them, you know, they wanted to know it had been done and they wanted that comfort. So it can happen either way. So you can either basically trust your merchant. So say, I'm happy to have face pay with Burger Fuel, and I'm happy for that to be a completely seamless transaction, that I get a notification in my banking app, but I don't have to get my phone out. Or you could say, well, actually, I like to be even a bit more control and I want a second factor authentication. So yeah, the whole idea of this and what we were trying to achieve was, while understanding all the things that you guys are asking about, which is security and, you know, is this a bit Big Brother and all that kind of stuff, was also to say, okay, but, you know, if we don't have plastic cards in the future, how do we do this in a more seamless way? And how do we make it better than getting your wallet out and, or getting your mobile phone out and waving it or whatever? What's a better experience? You know, and a lot of merchants also want to take away the payment experience being part of their experience. They want it to be about the food or the conversation with the person that you see every week. Or if you're in a clothing store, you know, I want to get you dressed up and have you leave, you know, without the payment being this thing where you have to go queue up and, you know, make it a big drama and decide whether or not you're going to leave the store with the item or not. So, you know, it's trying out all those new experiences.
Certainly my personal experience of being in the UK area this year, I used my phone for everything. I didn't even take my wallet out. I used it to pay for goods. I used it on the underground, and I used it on the buses. It was just the device. The problem was when it went flat one night on the underground, got whacked some big charge. Just ask a couple more questions. One here from Mark: what's in it for the banks? Because they currently make a lot of dollars through MasterCard and Visa. So why would they want to support something that's going to reduce their income?
That's a really good point. And that is, you know, to be fair, that is something that is part of, I guess, the struggle at the moment and getting the innovation going. But I think there's two parts to that. Yes, they do. At the moment, the good old EFTPOS card, which is still, you know, used, is just a cost to them, where some of these future innovations could enable them to make money out of them, perhaps not the money that they currently enjoy out of the global guys. But also I think it's about, for them, you know, how do they make sure that Kiwi merchants are able to compete and able to, you know, at the moment, let's face it, survive and have the kinds of experiences that, you know, we're used to. We're used to being at the forefront of payments. So I think for the banks, it's about that customer experience. It's about their consumer experience. Why should Kiwis be left behind when, you know, if you're in Asia, there's, you know, you've got thousands of different ways that you can pay. So, you know, I think there is that as well. And there's a whole lot of other services that you can hang off this capability, you know, whether it's digital identity, you know, Will talked about the bill payments. There's a whole lot of other stuff and information that they can help their merchants with, which helps them sell other products and services.
Yep. And just following on from that, someone said, well, do you think regulatory intervention might be necessary? And we've seen that in other industries, so you might not want to answer that one.
I think the concern with regulatory intervention is, you know, as we've seen in other industries, you know, it becomes a really long, slow process. And I mean, I think we would rather see the industry get together and innovate for the future than be stuck in, you know, worrying about regulating old technology and, you know, let's move on, let's do some cool things that can really help both the banks and the merchants and our consumers.
I'm going to ask the last question back to Sean again, since he's the one that's been using this stuff. Someone's asked, has COVID-19 made this sort of innovation more of a priority? And you might want to answer it from a retailer's perspective.
So, I mean, you know, COVID has definitely changed a lot of things. Is it a priority? Yep, absolutely. I mean, we were already on the path. You know, the pilot that we were doing was, you know, the last quarter of last year. I think it is a priority, absolutely. You know, the flip side is that the only other suitable option for us as a merchant would be to try and push people towards the online EFTPOS e-com product. A bit of a separate discussion than what we're here for today, but the simple truth is that you know, if we don't, then we're just going to keep handing over margin to these global companies that you know, say that it's an increased risk issue as to why the fees are charged, but from what I've seen, whenever there's an issue, the funds seem to get taken straight from us. So I'm not sure where that risk sits. I definitely think that it is important that we continue to push forward with this. As I say, what that payment instrument is, I'm not certain of yet. You know, I think Face was really cool to trial. You know, maybe that's just from the movies I saw growing up, who knows? But I will continue to pursue this and help out, you know, when and if I can, absolutely, because, you know, if we don't support our own businesses in our own backyard, there's not really much point in doing anything here in New Zealand, you know.
Hey, well, thank you very much, Sean and Maxine and Will. And who knew payment was so intriguing and involved? I mean, great presentation, actually. And the reason why we were talking to Maxine and Paymark about this is because the World Economic Forum has picked this is one of the 10 technologies that we need to keep an eye out on coming out of COVID, because it is going to be impacted. So look, thanks again. Thanks so very much to everybody. Those of you on the call that have stuck around, just the next one that's coming up is around the opportunities that 5G and next gen networks provide. It's again one of those 10 technologies that the World Economic Forum has picked up. Also, if you're in our Flint demographic, we've got a really good session tomorrow afternoon on developing your career post-COVID. I think many of us are saying and thinking that the second half of the year is going to be quite disruptive and difficult. But once again, thank you, Maxine, Will and Sean, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon on this session. It will be available on our YouTube channel in a couple of days, and we'll see you again at our next event. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Greg.